If you shut the door to all errors, truth will be shut out. Rabindranath Tagore.
Using the architect's codes I'd stolen, Edge sabotaged the Saint Michel Dam, flooding the Comfortress. According to him, it was just desserts for those who only worried about their own comfort. Why did I do what he asked? I could have left the city. Invented myself a new life somewhere else. But I wanted to come back to being public enemy number one. Was it part of who I am? Have we brought justice for the outcasts of Slum 404, or have my actions condemned them to more suffering? Only a militant believes that the ends always justify the means. Ed revealed to me that my memory had been conserved in the fortress of the Bastille since my conviction. I have to go there and recover my true self. The only way to get into the Bastille is with the memories of Johnny Greenteeth, a colourful resident of Slum 404. The problem is that no one knows who he really is, or where he hides out.
Howdy, my name is Alex, but you can call me Pitu. There are quite a few things already to talk about. I have mentioned the self-doubt of Nilin at the end of the previous episode, but now we have the doubt over Edge, second-guessing the decisions made and the identity that made them, and the setting of a goal to connect the dots. Let's just go through all these first.
Okay, Nilin. Tommy can help you get back inside La Bastille. Go back to his barn.
Couldn't he have done that this morning when I was there?
No, we had to drain Slum 404's lower levels first.
You got everything planned out, huh?
There's a mistrust building up in Nilin about Edge. It's quite understandable because she has no memory of him before the escape, and to rescue her seems now as if Edge only wanted to use her for his own goals, to destroy the dam. Now, as she is planning to head back to La Bastille to retrieve her memories, she asks if that was necessary to leave from there just to head back a few hours later, and Edge gives the straight answer that the dam had to be destroyed first. The suspicion rises in Nilin and clouds her thinking. Her memory is, to be exact, that she was in no condition to infiltrate the prison then, especially not without her glove.
Things took a bad turn around here.
Kinky memory burglar Nilin, Errorist and Edge's current fun buddy, seemed to confirm the Errorist leader's claims. Chief of Saberforce, Captain Squarejaw Tightpants Trace, has promised a take-no-prisoners approach to counter this threat to Neo-Paris. As emergency teams flounder in the wake of the Saint Michel flood, the enigmatic Errorist leader, known simply as Edge, has taken credit for this outrageously cool act of sabotage. The botched arrest of kinky memory burglar Nilin, Errorist and Edge's current fun buddy, seemed to confirm the Errorist leader's claims. Chief of
The power of mistrust is strong, and now it is heavily covered with fear. And fear has many, many faces. The most obvious we could see in Nilin's case is that she is either ruining her real identity that she had before the memory wipe, or that her past might be controlling her new identity, which seems to be having a very different moral ground. If that is the case, Edge might wrongly expect from her the same conduct than before, and that kind of miscommunication can understandably create the foundations of said mistrust. That mistrust and Nilin's fear is the same thing here, that she is being used. She already helped destroying the living conditions of thousands, or likely millions, and she is still operating with the person who made her do it, without even explaining her the plan that is still going on, and she is still needed for the ultimate success. Actually, she is doing the hard work. Wouldn't you guys be afraid that you are making things even worse? Aren't you already having the same kind of worry in your everyday life from time to time, just in a smaller scale? That you might not be able to make things right because you don't seem to have the knowledge or the experience, the memory of a better choice to not fail again. Everyone has done these kind of mistakes. They are the ones that burn in your memories easily. But what do you do when you have the feeling that you're approaching a similar decision? I myself have been crippled by self-doubt a couple of times caused by fear of not being able to undo my errors. They still had consequences though.
Welcome to Maggie Experts, a daily politically incorrect news source and general blabathon. My couch warmer today is Captain Gabriel Trace, the oh-so-serious chief of Saber Force. Howdy, Captain. How would you gauge the errorist threat?
We're witnessing the last desperate acts of a dying movement.
Really? A headline sabotage, a crazy-ass flood, thousands of citizens doing the hobo shuffle, and Molotov street parties in the poorer districts. And we have public enemy number one, that Mad Cat Nilin, still at large. This dying movement is up and dancing on the tables.
Saber forces are deployed around Slum 404 to deter any spread of civil unrest. Chaos shall not be allowed to rule. As for Miss Nilin, her old cell is being made ready at the Bastille.
Thank you, honeybuns. I'm sure the few citizens that aren't rioting now feel totally reassured. This is Perky Maggie, telling it like it is. Welcome to Maggie Said It First, your daily...
Nilin's cell is ready and waiting, and we're heading back there very soon. But not because that is a place to be. She has to figure out what she should really do, and the memories that can keep her from making the same mistakes again require her to regain those memories. Her prioritized motivation at this moment is to understand herself, to become the Nilin she was throughout her whole life. And that is a great risk to take, because she might not have been such a good-hearted, innocent person who's been introduced to us.
I am the remedy to your sadness. Take
Actually, can you say that she didn't cause anything else than harm since she escaped? From that perspective, isn't it understandable that the authorities try to stop her? I know, memory wipe is a cruel process, but in a prison, as a rehabilitation program on criminals, in a society that is already used to these methods, the errorists really seem to be the bad guys. The only things to ruin that idea are the Reapers. They are the unacceptable side effects of the process that doesn't let people forget the prices they pay for the technological advancements of their minds. They were the very first things to introduce to Nilin outside of La Bastille, and it doesn't look like she's gonna forget about them soon. So, on a moral aspect of view, Nilin is fighting against a corporation that is responsible for her literal fight against the Reapers. On a personal level, she's fighting for her identity, so her actions might become justifiable, and taking the right chances may be even acceptable in the end. Tell me if that sounds intriguing or not. I know that numerous stories have their protagonists suffer from amnesia, so they can transfer the audience to be part of the events. That way they can ask questions and get answers that need to be told. In a few cases though, that position is presented in a brilliant way. I'm not saying that this story does the best job with that, but we definitely gather more and more questions that Nilin has to find the answers for, and all revelations are expected to come from her own memories. And that is why, for now, we can only have questions.
Jax? This ad. I've heard it before.
That's a good sign, sister. It means your core memory resisted the treatment.
A happy place product. Happy Place, the place for fun. Jax knows everything. Jax does everything. Jax looks out for your children, and your children love him. To celebrate his 25th anniversary, Classic Jax is back, but with all the latest innovations, making him toy #1 this season. Jax the Panda, a Happy Place product. Happy Place, the place for fun.
Stupid bug kept the line on the screen for minutes and made me look like an idiot trying to get rid of it. But anyways, Nilin's core memory resisted the treatment, said Edge. But let's change a word in that statement and use the word trauma instead of treatment. Now we're about to enter a very different discussion. How does memory resist trauma? The brain separates the traumatic part, so the content of our memory stays unharmed. Isn't it fascinating? Our mental health is protected in a way that is considered for the laity as mentally damaged. And the catch is that they can also be right. Let's start again. For someone who's been in a terrible accident and saw severed limbs, bloody gore, or a loved one injured, died even, if the brain locks up those memories in the back of their minds, It is a protection for their mental stability, and a job well done. But for someone who commits domestic abuse that is caused by mental damage, and the brain locks away those memories, so the next day they won't remember what they've done, and their family in fear would think that they only act as nothing has happened the day before, the brain tried to do the same job, but failed with the other part that committed the crime. You need to understand something. The examples were very extreme. The first one is quite common in our everyday life, on a small scale, even without the trauma. The second one is exceptionally rare. Sadly, not the domestic part, but that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. But the brain locking away those memories, that is unlikely. The rule is that the brain tries to protect the mind, the personality, the mental health, and frankly, it has the ability to tamper with the memories to do that, and cause different kinds of amnesia in the process. But the reason was always protection. Unfortunately, there's no quality control in the brain over that, so it works on instinct and ability. These are not visible traits, and in a way similar in everyone, although differs the most in those cases where exceptional incidents occur. It is very hard to recognize the deviations, because they are designed for the person experiencing them to not experience them. Even when somehow in certain events it becomes obvious that something is not right, the brain tries to fight the realization. And there are a few types of mental disorders that work exactly like that. They are usually misunderstood, because Hollywood usually displayed them as almost or entirely supernatural villains. The writers, directors and producers didn't even bother to use the right phrases for them, and that's how I grew up, thinking that Dr. Jekyll's schizophrenic counterpart was Mr. Hyde, and the condition was not even real. I've been wrong in so many levels. I'm not getting into schizophrenia, because I didn't refurbish my knowledge about it enough to be confident to explain. Although what you should know, that it has nothing to do with multiple personalities. But what does then? You're probably looking for the dissociative identity disorder, DID in short. Still, forget about the superficial nonsense in the movies, even though this disorder is one of the most curious things I have ever encountered. Not personally, but we'll get there. As far as I know, DID isn't multiple personality either, and probably that's why the name of the disorder has been changed. They are one personality fragmented to multiple parts called alters, separated by amnesia, so they have separate memories. In most cases, they don't know about each other, hence they don't know about their own conditions. When that changes? Well, I suggest that you look up Dissociative's channel and you will be amazed. I put the link in the description. You might be interested. How common is that condition? As I've heard, more than 1% of people have it in some extent. But the brain doesn't navigate through lexicons and definitions and stuff to decide which disorder to use. It doesn't work that way. So there are differences in DID as well, and similar conditions that are not even close to be DID, and of course there are conditions affecting memories that are not even similar. But I was intrigued enough that I asked a girl that I knew since before elementary school, who's been willing to talk about her condition that she has since high school. So, in her case, it wasn't even trauma. There are only guesses about blood pressure and recurring faints that caused the back of her head to be hit the same place multiple times. Since then, she's experiencing memory loss, mostly about exact things, but the emotions remain.
Nealon, I'm waiting for you at the Leaking Brain. I'm looking forward to helping you find Johnny.
Johnny?
Johnny Greenteeth, the bogeyman of Slum 404. He still remembers all the old passageways beneath La Bastille. At least that's what Edge says.
Okay, I'm inbound.
For a few years though, she has encountered the kind of incidents, like when she was attempting to a music lesson for example, and not remembering what part they were practicing, or getting out of the metro realizing that she don't even know where she is and how she got there. These situations might not happen to her anymore, but the memory loss is still there. However, the studies, the songs and performances, she doesn't forget. The thing is that I have known her all my life, so I've known about her condition and relationship with memories, but as I've been interviewing her for this video, she told me the far most particular stuff that I've never heard about before. Not because it was a secret.
What was that?
but because it wasn't my business, regardless the trust between us. I asked how many people knows about it. As I've guessed, not much. People could look at others as they are freaks over things like these. They can easily lose their friends or their jobs. It could be haunting. People with known and treated mental disorders that are not even closely considered dangerous for the environment or the society, they keep it as a secret because they don't want to be treated as freaks or fear that they might hurt someone. Usually they are the victim of some kind of trauma that resulted with their brain defending so strongly that it inflicted some kind of self-damage. Only in recent times has most information become available for basically everyone, so now we are able to realize what is the truth about mental disorders that were used to create fictional monsters, by making the ones struggling with the real thing feel abandoned, forcing them to hide throughout their whole lives.
Tommy, I just had a run-in with some leapers. Scary. They vanish at will.
I stopped being surprised by any of the evil shit that comes out of those tunnels a long time ago.
I'll be there soon. Until I get there, keep your eyes peeled.
However, a fair share of those who can't take them seriously still remain. Of course, there are people who believe that these conditions are lies, even amongst those who watch this video. Even if there are only a handful of them. Because they think all of this is fiction. Just as there are people who think that the coronavirus is a scam, as if there would be any benefit for anyone faking the need of a civilization to stop for a while, or the need of a person to fake that they are crazy in most eyes. Because they are judged first, before their prosecutors are looking after public information and let fear overcome their judgment. Yes, it is fear again.
This is gonna hurt. Suck it up, Nilin.
On the other hand, the current Western society has given birth to a fashionably insane breed, who hide behind the protection of political correctness and the double standards of free speech that allows them to act as mentally unstable and get offended by every accusation questioning it. Although those who are really suffering from mental disorders and society's reactions about them should be treated carefully, the present chaos has become unmanageable in some ways. Who's to say which conditions are real and which is attention-seeking? It is a sensitive question on more than one level, because whoever tries to use a mental disorder to become a special snowflake might not just realize that they have a different one, only not that cool, not that accepted, not that appreciated. That is the reason why I can have a lot of empathy for people struggling with different kinds of anxieties, while at the same time looking at those with skepticism who are claiming they have it, although clearly they don't. But they seem like they genuinely think that they are part of the awesome culture of anxiety, and their subconscious insists that they shouldn't be left out. The need for being considered unique seems to reach new heights with the rise of the population. Can you spot the fear in that? The fear of being insignificant, unimportant, worthless, unforgettable. Isn't that enough to build up as anxiety in someone? I still think that is a different thing and should be named differently, so those who have the real anxiety could be treated as such and wouldn't be neglected as depression was after becoming mainstream. But why wouldn't anyone want to be considered normal? Probably because nowadays so many of us can fail at the basics of life. Not even achieve a success in career or starting a family, but even moving out from our parents' house, taking care of ourselves, becoming self-sufficient. That can fuel anxiety like gasoline. Add some celebrities to the picture, even on a smaller scale, like popular gamers and streamers on Twitch for example. Many of them growing from anxiety-filled background.
Okay, up it is.
In spite of their weaknesses, they made some or more success in an environment where they could turn things around, at least for a bit. Many of their viewers don't see the hard part of it, because the streamers who suffer from it doesn't want to show it. So it seems like a minor thing to some people who start to envy it. Some are simply faking it to get to the same level, and their anxiety might even come from the feeling of cheating. Others might even build up hate against those whoever they are watching, because if they could achieve success regardless of their anxiety, then they are left with no excuse. Their fear of being useless with a life leading nowhere builds up in them, and we all know how it goes. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering. They hold on to that anger, that hate, and they project it towards what they think it's coming from, popular figures and celebrities, with the endeavor of sabotaging their success, so they might retrieve their right for their excuse. This projection thing is something very dangerous, and will come up a lot in the future. For now I let go of that subject, but not the fear.
Careful, Millen. Nice and easy, does it?
Fear is something that is hard to let go. In most cases, being afraid from a hurt to happen again and holding on to it leads to being stuck in an even greater hurt that lasts so much longer that can stress people out like hell. The inability to forget can consume the clear sight, and fear can strengthen up the memory of pain, making it essential to avoid.
Subscribers of Platanews and Extremsense. Flash update. The hospital ship Nymphaea has been rocked by an explosion. The cause of the blast is as yet unknown, but initial estimates put casualties at 100 dead and several thousand wounded. A Sen-Sen emergency channel has been opened.
I can't emphasize enough how much fear people can consume from their past, from things that have already happened and remain unchangeable. The past is something we have no power over, not even the slightest, to change. At least not in the way this powerlessness ruins the minds of those stuck in the wish to have at least a different memory. How many of you wish that you forget something and go on without the grief you had to endure and keep with yourself against your own will? How many of you will take the power to change how you remember a loss, an insult, or an abuse? But we all have to keep on living with them.
Home again. Rack 'em up, Tommy.
Well, not all of us has to do that the same way, but it has its price.
I preferred the rats!
When the water dropped, it revealed the old subway. Those lizard brain screw-ups bugged out through there.
They've invaded the whole neighborhood.
You want to find Johnny? You're gonna have to go deep into Leaper territory. Hell, they didn't stay scared for long. Hold them off, just a second or two. Mix a little cocktail. Tommy's special.
So, how would you protect yourself from bad memories, especially when they seem to overwhelm you?
Joke over. There's too many of them.
With a healthy mind, it's not an unwinnable fight.
What did you say to these guys, Tommy?
With a healthy mind, our brain stands its ground, pushes through the difficult times, selects the ill thoughts, puts them on the shelves in our desolated backstorage, which we steer clear of, and only go there when something else leads us to it, or when we're more comfortable with our stuff, so we can get rid of the past grievances, because we're in the healing process, and to finish it completely, we're finally able to let go of the things that we thought we cannot change. And yet, there we are, changing by our own will how our past affects us.
Dylan! It's ready. Come here. I call it the junk vault. My own recipe. Don't hold back with this one, girl. Spread the love.
Thanks.
Dylan! Close the door! Aim at the cables! Cut them off!
Of course, people around can help, but they don't win those fights. Our past was never their suffering to deal with, and taking credit for being able to overcome our misery is a very important thing to do.
I must cut off their reinforcements.
Just as our minds weakens as we criticize ourselves because of the mistakes we do, it strengthens as we acknowledge our successes. Actually, it's not the same. The defense mechanism of our brain kicks in again, and positive confirmation are taken more easily, leading to more progress than negative. And positive confirmations doesn't necessarily have to come from others. As a matter of fact, they are quite needed from ourselves from time to time.
Is that all you got? That's what I thought! Hey, you wanna help? You can stick around, help me fix up my place.
No can do. Bigger fish to fry. Fish like Johnny Greenteeth.
How's a boy to compete with a wet tunnel leading into Leaper-infested darkness, huh? Have a heart.
Sorry about your bar, Tommy.
You be careful, Neelan. There's a storm brewing, sweetheart. You don't let it swallow you up!
Dealing with fear, anxiety, and bad memories seems to be a solitary task. We're all experiencing it in some extent, but rarely do we let others into our struggles or show the side of us that suffers under circumstances where others don't seem to break. However, in reality, everyone has to deal something under the surface. Maybe not anxiety. Maybe worse.
Hey, Nilin, how are you? Wow, you and Edge really threw the shit at the fan. The whole city's in a panic.
Yeah. Shit seems to be the word of the day.
Okay, good. I gotta get going. I think I've been made. Remember you soon.
You know, we are allowed to bury our fears, pretend that they are non-existent, but sooner or later we need to face them. We can stall, or we can prepare, but eventually we have to reach some kind of closure, or else they will stay with us forever. Maybe hidden, maybe seemingly far in the back of our minds, but still there, giving out small doses of stress that poisons our health. And not just mentally. Rabindranath Tagore said, "If you shut the door to all errors, truth will be shut out." And our fears contain the kind of truth that we don't want to accept. Many cases we shouldn't, but we have to defeat them. We have to come out stronger, reconquering the segments of our minds that were lost for all the time we were unable to recover. After that, healing will feel rapid compared to what it was like before, and it will have a gift for us as well, in the form of some confidence. I'm not trying to make it sound easy. The kind of fear that caused traumatic experiences in our past is something our brain tries to avoid phobically. I have mentioned DID, where the mind is so much devoted to protection that it creates an altar, or maybe more, to possess the trauma, so the rest of the others can live normally without even remembering what caused the shattering of the mind. That wall of amnesia is a barrier created by survival instincts. Not everyone can have DID, by the way, but everyone has survival instincts, and they are the nemesis of fear. Survival instincts can cause people to do things they wouldn't think they are capable of, and I don't just mean the adrenaline rush. People can instantly forget about the weaker emotional connections that otherwise would feel very strong to them without danger, and that can make people choose their own life instead of someone they love. And that love wouldn't be faked either. It's just the fear of death overriding it. We tend to despise a decision like that when we see them in the movies, even though it's a normal reaction, and very few of us, only in very certain cases, would really trade our lives for anyone else. In those life or death situations, people can even forget temporarily about automated bodily functions like urinary retention, which you probably heard about. Yes, I mean pissing yourself in fear. So you can guess how deep the sudden stress can go.
Damn it, Nilin. Like a bug in a jar.
Take a shot.
Johnny? Johnny Greenteeth?
Another injection! Doctor, I'm hurt, Doctor.
Make your way up the wagons to the cabin. Look for the emergency brake control.
I haven't been mentioning the subjectivity of being afraid. When I say fear, I don't mean some shining level of shit. We watch those movies by choice, and the fun part of them is the relief that they are not real. Real fear is much more subtle, much more pleasant. And for most people, their subconscious can deal with them easily with words like these.
I am not letting you in here! I said I am not letting you in here!
But that is because everyone has a different sense of fear. Some are afraid of snakes, others afraid of spiders. If spiders were never scary for you, then you probably feel safe from them. If one bit you when you were little, you might be scarred for life, maybe even blaming all the insects too. My skating hobby can be a good example. I was riding the wheels for years downward on a steep street next to my childhood house with a speed I dread to think back now. And one time I fell, so I could evade a dog that was jumping in front of me. I've been sliding at least 30 meters on my side, bruising all the skin on my left. Took me 3 months to dare to skate even on a flat terrain again. Accidents are frequent causes of trauma. You remember what happened last time. But then, what's the deal with flying? Those who are afraid on planes probably never been on a crash before. It's simple. Just because I'm analyzing how memory works doesn't mean everything is connected to it.
What was that thing?
Probably a new mutation form. Maybe an evolved species of leaper.
His mind. It was like a bubbling sea of rage and suffering.
Get out of the metro. There's all kinds of things lurking down there.
Fear from the unknown. It is based on the lack of memory. Or acrophobia, which is either the perception of unusual heights, or it can be based on already existent falling experience from earlier too, presumably an unpleasant one. Fear from losing a job, because that could lead to not being able to provide for ourselves, which could result in asking for help, maybe even from parents, resulting in feeling like a child again. Or worse, like a failure. Ding! Anxiety. Fear from trusting others, like being lied to, because we've been lied to before. May I mention how substantial that is if family members, especially parents, did that to us? Nah, not yet. We're gonna dive very deep into that sometime. For now, the government should be enough. Fear is a tool for control. Unfortunately, not for those suffering from it, but large amount of people can be directed towards a common threat. Just as I said in the first episode when I was explaining the Leapers. Don't worry if you don't remember, I only brought that up so I can pretend like I was planning to foreshadow this sentence. I'm so smart. But anyways, the government spokesman tactic is to repeat the same thing over and over again until we can't even distinguish their words from our own thoughts. We remember it being said. Then we remember that it was already said even earlier. After a while we feel like it was always there, and by that time we fear that our home is endangered, that people from other countries are coming to destroy our nation, and that we have to vote this questionable law so we could be protected. Let's send some soldiers there to prevent them from coming here. Let's scare them to death and put the fear in them as well. And give me a gun so I can protect my own ass in case they are already in my backyard. Because they are everywhere.
Admire the madness of our generation. Families once lived here. The government had them forcibly removed to construct Saint-Michel Dam and secure the fortress of La Bastille.
Think of the devastation that Western civilization causes with its narrow-mindedness. Don't we bring the wrath on ourselves acting like that? Who are the ones with real memories of soldiers breaking in their home and killing their people? Who are the ones having scars that can never be healed? Try to compare a teenager's anxiety to that. I'm not trying to make it seem insignificant, no. I'm saying that our self-esteem makes us receptive for the propaganda we are given, and they probably have their ways too. I'm not specific. History has more than enough examples.
You hear that? You heard that, right? Jeez, calm down. Like a freaking cat in a flux chamber. This is our last rotation, and they're flushing the slum. Okay?
Okay, Johnny, let's see how you did it.
I think I have made my points. Maybe a bit too much off topic at times. All that I've been talking about has kind of a loose connection to the story. At least I think like it in the context of this episode.
La Bastille isn't too far from here.
But there's so much more to tell, and I'm still compressing a lot of what's on my mind. My much stronger connection to my script is that I am dedicated to share my views, and I am afraid that what I don't say, I won't be able to get back to later to tell, and that I will forget about them.
People used to live here.
Outcasts. Miserable souls. All moved far away when they built the new La Bastille.
Well, I had these few seconds to show a bit of my backstory into them. I might as well explain the reason of the topic. Because I can't really talk without spoilers about why Johnny Greenteeth still remembers all the old passageways beneath La Bastille, as Tommy said, even though Nil involves them in this very moment.
Well done, Nilin. Another 97 falls and you'll be there.
It has a lot to do with his anger and hate. Johnny couldn't let go of his memories of hurt. He kept them inside himself so that it grew to be a bubbling sea of rage and suffering, as Nilin said before.
That's it, Johnny. Don't let go of me now.
The other minor spoiler is that we'll get back to Johnny later, because now I have to praise the method that the developers used, leading Nilin through a minefield using the cinematics and an easy puzzle that still needs the player's focus, so they wouldn't recognize the wide area they are walking on. Which we all know can only mean one thing. Boss fight.
Citizen, you are subject to a Sigma 8 arrest warrant. Stand down immediately.
Not just any boss fight. The same type of mech that scared the crap out of Nilin during her escape. It's the Zorn, and this one is protecting the back door to La Bastille, probably a bit forgotten, with less than the usual maintenance protocol since this area was underwater for years, and that was more than enough protection for the prison island. Which is not an island anymore, thanks to our intervention with the dam. Anyways, this fellow might have been a traumatic experience for Nilin. However, she was regaining her strength and abilities, so she might not have been prepared for the surprise attack, but still more than capable to face on this enemy. I hope you find it resonating with my words from earlier about defeating the fear lurking in the back of our minds, almost forgotten, but still able to cause a lot of damage if it can resurface. We might not even feel ready for it. Life is not ideal, especially not in this kind of sense. Dealing with our problems is where we are the weakest, and being handicapped by fear as well is a task that no one really asks for. Succeeding despite all of that though, it is a sensation able to rise us into heights we were longing to reach, able to repair mental injuries we almost gave up on. All this could sound like I'm thinking about our brains as this fragile, easily breakable organ, and yes, in a way it is, because it is very complex and sensitive and most of us doesn't take good care of it. Not even our own, let alone others. Meanwhile, it is capable of wonders beyond imagination, no matter how paradox it sounds, and not just by itself but outside of its boundaries too. Everything that our civilization has came from brains. And yet, so many of us use it to hurt, to destroy, to deny from it the best parts of life, like love, care, compassion, creation and admiration, trust, just to pretend something we barely or not at all understand. Just to pretend. Just to pretend. We are responsible for creating all the fear that is poisoning us. And that is why we fall so easily into a bitter hole of self-loathing. That got a little dramatic in the end, didn't it? Gameplay-wise, this was my least favorite episode, because it's mostly about the depressing aftermath of destroying the dam, getting a new ability, and only a bit of story at the end. This episode is a build-up, or at least I feel like it, and don't get me wrong, I still like it very much, and it's coherent with the rest, it's just that the rest is better. At least this part let me expand the topic of fear a bit more than what I expected to fit in before I started to write the script. I did even more research than for the addiction subject, because I knew a lot about that before, and it's a more recognizable thing in the environment, with more distinguishable symptoms. For example, anxiety, which is a symptom if we want to be accurate, but nowadays we can kinda consider it as a disorder by itself, and it comes hand in hand with fear that on the other hand is everywhere in some level. It can be such a small thing that someone doesn't dare to say a compliment, or a complaint, or anything really. But all of them are driving forces with deep connections towards each other. It seems like I could say that about every mental state though. Inside our brain everything is connected directly or indirectly, and we can't avoid anything affecting us. The brain processes an impact, and we proceed in different ways with every variation of interpretation, even with ignoration. It's inevitable. Some people see that as fate. For me it means that fate is a very undefined conception, because I can see why this view exists, but I can also understand that it differs from the traditional explanation it originates from, because it is much more simple, easier to get the masses behind it, especially if some men of power threw faith into their methods of influence in the past. But that's how theology might become the subject one day to talk about. To get me there, I ask you to support me with such simple things like subscription, thumb direction, and perhaps votes that I have provoked. All this would be really appreciated, but most of all, thanks for checking this out.